The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Hello and welcome to Wonderfully Made. My name is Dr. Christine Salter. I'm board certified in family medicine and in private practice in St. Louis, Missouri. Today we're going to be discussing about a simple home remedy called activated charcoal. Mr. John Dinsley, who's our guest, has written a book about this. Welcome, John.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be here with you today, Dr. Salter. I'm going to enjoy this.
Tell me, why did you write a book about charcoal?
Well, it is a good question. A lot of people do ask me that, and it goes back a few years, 30-some years ago. Well, not quite 30. I decided to hike around the world. And on my adventures, I wandered into a small medical clinic in Guatemala. And there was a physician there and his family who were working and living there. The Dr. Graves was a board-certified California physician. He was a graduate of La Loma Linda University.
Okay.
They had an amazing lifestyle, which fascinated me. But one of the things that really captivated my attention was their use of natural medicine, or natural remedies.
Simple remedies.
Simple, very simple. You see, a lot of the patients that came to the clinic lived back in the mountains, and they really didn't have good access to the clinic, and so the doctor tried to equip them with things that they could use when they went back to their villages. So
what impressed you about this particular village and what this physician was doing?
Well, again, the natural medicine. I had in university, I had an interest in science and biology, and I'd taken a break from that, and I wanted to explore the world. But it was such a new idea to think about using simple natural remedies. I was used to going to a hospital, to an emergency room, visiting my doctor in a nice office back in America, and this was a completely different setting. And one day, I remember clearly, we were right along the Pan American Highway. A bus stopped, and these parents came in, rushed in with this young child in their arms, obviously unconscious, convulsing. And the doctor immediately assessed the situation, decided it was some form of food poisoning, had the parents remove the blouse, and he mixed up this black stuff, this paste, and he smeared it all over her belly.
Oh.
And within, I'm sure, 15 minutes, the girl was resting quietly. And I thought, black magic.
What was that black stuff?
Well, believe it or not, it was charcoal. Now, a lot of people say, you mean charcoal briquettes? No, it's not charcoal briquettes. It's, in this particular instance, it was just ground up charcoal. But what we're going to be talking about today with the audience is medicinal charcoal or activated gray charcoal.
Please tell our audience what you mean by activated charcoal.
Well, we start off with the raw product charcoal. The leftovers from your campfire, from your wood stove, is basically just carbon. Most of the other products have been burned off. It's been basically dehydrated, and you have this charcoal. Now, when you activate charcoal, you actually take that raw product again and you heat it back up to a high temperature, say 800 degrees Celsius, and then you subject it to air or maybe steam under pressure, and this erodes the internal structure, the fabric of this charcoal particle, and it gives us this tremendous surface area. So that's what activation or activated charcoal means.
Okay, so I know that in the emergency room, the standard dose of activated charcoal, which is 50 grams, that is actually equivalent to the size of 10 football fields.
Well, it is. It's absolutely amazing. This internal network, this lattice work, if you want, of the charcoal. And maybe we could throw up on our screen a picture of charcoal powder.
Okay.
And you can see how how really fine it is. Now, charcoal is actually made from a number of different products, or I should say activated charcoal. It can come from wood, hardwoods. It can actually come from olive pits or bamboo or coconut.
Okay.
There are many different sources for the initial product, and then they activate it. And you can see on the screen here that it is very, very fine. If you want to take a look at the next one, we have actually an electron micrographic picture of a charcoal particle.
Okay.
And on this one, even this very, very minute particle, you can see on this picture how much surface there is there.
Yes.
Now you can imagine taking 50 grams of that and unfolding this, and you can see the tremendous surface area. And it's that surface area that accounts for some of the amazing qualities that charcoal has.
Well, actually, you know, the American Academy of Pediatrics put out a position statement in 2003 that said activated charcoal was the best intervention for reducing the availability of ingested substances. So we can see from that surface area why it does this. But tell me, how far does charcoal go back?
Well, it has a long history. We can trace it back to 1500 years BC.
Oh.
Some interesting things. Back then they were using it to control odors from wounds.
Okay.
Eventually they decided, well, if it does so good with controlling odors, they discovered, well, let's bury our dead in layers of sand and charcoal, and it was able to preserve these dead bodies. They'd already experimented with posts along the River Nile, preserve these dead posts. So it preserved them. Then moving up to, say, 400 BC, Hippocrates prescribed charcoal for anthrax and different things in his day, along with Pliny. Then it starts moving into let's say, the 1700s, and the sugar industry started using charcoal to whiten sugar. The activation process developed in the late 1800s. And then the uses of charcoal literally exploded. They were using it for all manner of different things.
All kind of things.
Maybe we could show up on our screen a graphic showing some of these different uses of charcoal. As I said, it goes back to 1500 years BC. You'll see that it was using it for flatulence and indigestion, that's gas. In fact, when Europeans came to North America, they found American Indians using charcoal to control indigestion. Since then, of course, we've found that it works very well for nausea and vomiting. Diarrhea, we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. Poisoning, we'll talk about that as well. Poisonous bites, anthrax, kidney and liver dialysis machines used in hospitals, pink eye, colostomies. They used it in cancer, also for hepatitis. There's even literature now talking about charcoal's ability to reduce cholesterol. Of course, it's used in allergies. Yes, cholesterol.
Heart disease is the #1 killer, and so something as simple as cholesterol lowering with charcoal would be extremely useful.
Sounds almost like black magic, doesn't it?
It does sound like black magic.
But you know, there is a lot of science behind it, and so it is used in industry every single day. Vegetable oils are cleaned with charcoal. We drink water that's filtered with charcoal. And as you saw on that screen, kidney dialysis machines actually filter blood through a bed of granular charcoal to make it clean. Well,
hospitals are using this on a regular basis, but we want our viewing audience to know they're not hospital personnel, so should they feel comfortable about using this remedy in the home?
They certainly can. Not everybody has the privilege of living next door to a hospital or an emergency ward. And some of our viewers probably are living in other countries where even their medical facilities are even more remote than we see them here. But even in our own communities here in North America, people in their homes are using it every single day. My wife and I use it in our home, have been using it for almost 30 years. Our children use it, and they've taught their children to use it, so our grandchildren are accustomed to using it. But again, healthcare professionals use it, not only in the hospitals. I have a very close friend. She's a head nurse, and she's worked across North America, Hawaii, Alaska, in emergency rooms. And you've worked in emergency rooms as well. She's used it there, but she uses it in her home as well.
Absolutely. I've used it in my home too. I've seen it used in the emergency room for toxic ingestions where somebody may die unless they're given this, but something simply in the home. We're not suggesting that our viewers use this in an emergency situation, well, not here in North America because we know they can get to an emergency room. But in other places where they may not have access, we would hope that they would use this. But for something very simple like a sore throat or an insect bite, have you had any experiences with those?
Well, yes, there's numbers of stories of insect bites. I guess one that comes to my mind is Dr. Thrash, who is a medical director for the state of Georgia, has been for 40-some years. She tells a story of her granddaughter who was outside playing, and she found herself playing on a hill of fire ants. And within seconds, there were literally hundreds of these insects biting her, and was screaming hysterically. Dr. Thrash ran up, they grabbed the child, ran for the house, filled a tub with warm water, placed the child in the warm water, and it had already mixed in charcoal powder. She said within 2 minutes, this poor child had stopped screaming, that the charcoal had neutralized the poisons, and the child was basically pain-free. Now, that's her experience. Dr. Agatha went so far as to say if she was stranded on a desert island and she could only choose one thing to take along with her for infections, for emergency, for accidents, she would choose charcoal.
Activated charcoal, absolutely. And I do agree with her on that. I've had an experience myself when I was in Florida, and I react I'm highly reactive to wasp stings or bee stings. And in fact, I was actually doing a demonstration about activated charcoal, and I'd already made up my poultice to be able to show the audience. And so that was already ready and waiting for me. And so in the interim, we went outside, and I was just out there having a conversation, and I felt something on my hand, and then the sting. And I knew that that my hand would swell. And so immediately I grabbed that poultice that was for the demonstration, and I put that right on there. And within, I'd say, 30 seconds, the stinging, the pain was gone, and I had no reaction. Usually I really would swell, and I had no reaction to that. And so when you think about the science of that, we've already showed the graphic of
the surface area.
The surface area. Right. There's something called Van der Waals forces, where they attract different particles to them. And so it makes sense.
Yeah, I like to relate it to a black hole. You know, this phenomena up in space is able to pull things to it, and then it doesn't let go of them.
Right.
It sounds fantastic, but here we have charcoal. You can't see black holes, but you can see charcoal.
Absolutely.
And if we had a quart jar here of activated charcoal, we're told that one quart jar can hold up to 80 quarts of ammonia gas. It's that tremendous surface area that binds these proteins or gas molecules or toxins, whatever they are, and holds them, and in the case of poisoning, holds them until the charcoal and the poison is eliminated from the body.
Eliminated from the body.
Now, obviously, we're not saying that people shouldn't make use of emergency rooms.
Right, we're not saying that.
Some people may go into an anaphylactic shock because of a bee sting. But how much more sense it makes to apply the charcoal while you're heading towards an emergency room where you can get professional help. This is sort of like a fire extinguisher until the firemen get to your help.
Instead of the parents or the family members feeling helpless, they would dial 911, and then they would put a poultice on, or they would have them drink some of that activated charcoal.
Exactly. In fact, there's a number of the poison control centers across North America do recommend, in fact, that you have charcoal in the home. I know there's some discussion whether parents are able to properly administer it to their children, but whether that's true or not, it seems to me that a parent who knows the child and the child who knows the parent is going to have a lot easier time to apply the charcoal in the home, and then head off to the emergency
room. What about something as simple as an ear infection? I remember my son was just a toddler and woke up screaming, pulling at his ear, and I knew exactly what was going on. I was a medical student at the time, and I looked in his ear, and he had a bulging eardrum. And I quickly made up a charcoal poultice and applied it to the external ear. And of course, I'd found that information from Dr. Agatha Thrash, and I applied that, and I'd say within just a few minutes, he calmed down, and he was able to sleep through the night. I still took him to the doctor the next morning, and she determined that he did have an ear infection, but it was amazing to have him just settle down and sleep through the night with a bulging eardrum.
And of course, that lets you relax a little bit too.
Exactly.
Well, I use an acronym called SAFE.
Tell us what SAFE means.
SAFE, as I've traveled in different countries, I've come back to North America with our amazing healthcare system. It's so readily available for most of us. And then I compare them to countries like Nepal or working out in the Pacific, where you may be hours from the nearest road or you may be days from the nearest clinic. And I have to ask myself the question, do you have to be wealthy to be healthy? Or does God only love rich people?
No.
Well, I don't think so either.
Not at all.
And so I came up with this acronym. I looked at, if God really loves us wherever you are in the world, whatever your socioeconomic status is, then it seems to me that remedies should be simple, they should be affordable, they should be accessible. You're going to have to measure out a little bit of faith when you take it with you. And lastly, they should be easy to apply. And then charcoal is easy. It's a little bit messy, but as you've used it over and over again, it gets easier to use.
It does get easier to use. I had my fair share of making a mess with charcoal. I know how to do it quite expertly now, but initially we had charcoal powder everywhere.
Yes.
But that SAFE acronym is really important. You said that maybe a place like Nepal would be a place for it to be used, but even here in North America, there's a lot of people who do not have access to health care. They cannot afford it, and they're out in the rural areas, and in some counties the physicians are moving away because of malpractice litigation. And so we do have a tremendous amount of people who do not have access, and this is something that is fairly simple that really could save someone's life.
Really, in fact, I was talking with one of the technicians before we did our program today, and he's training to be an EMT. And he was saying that, on board they carry charcoal.
They carry activated charcoal.
So on the way to the hospital, if you haven't applied it, there's a good chance they may apply it on the way to the hospital. But there's a number of different ways we can use it in the home. You mentioned the ears. You can apply it as a poultice or an eye wash for the eye infections.
Tell our viewing audience what a poultice is.
Well, you make a paste with charcoal. You can make it just with water. It tends to dry out more quickly. But if you mix it with something like ground up flaxseed, it makes a paste, a gel, and that moisture holds longer, and it's that moist contact with the skin that allows charcoal to somehow mysteriously draw toxins or poisons through the skin into the charcoal poultice.
And we want to make a point that this is not absorption. It's not sucking up. It's adsorbing, A-D, onto the surface through all those little crevices that we've spoken about. It has this
electrostatic type of affinity for other molecules. Some of them are, we might want to call them loose cannons. They're sort of in our body, maybe free radicals or toxins or waste products. And the Lancet magazine, which is a premier medical journal for England, has reported that when they apply charcoal poultice superficially, that somehow the mystery of charcoal is able to actually pull these toxins from deep tissue and as well deep organs.
Well, the forces that are, those van der Waals forces we talked about that are on the surface of charcoal really do pull and attract.
Yeah. Great black hole.
Into that big black hole.
Recently, a friend sent in a story of their daughter. Now, this lady is a nurse, practices at a large hospital.
Okay.
Her husband is an anesthesiologist, and their daughter developed urinary tract infection at the age of 2 years, I believe. And for the next 5.5 years, she suffered with this problem chronically. It got to the point where their physician decided that he would have to go in and scrape the ureters, scrape the bladder, dilate it, and check out the kidney as well. That's quite a major procedure.
There.
And it was, you can imagine the trauma, not just for the child, but the parents, what it must have put them through, thinking about, oh, there's got to be some other solution. Well, after 5.5 years, it was time to do another procedure, and the parents said, no, there's got to be something else. And they knew a chemist.
Okay.
And this chemist said, why don't you try charcoal? Place it in water, have her drink this charcoal slurry. Well, they did, and when the child took it, the friend told me that the child was symptomatic at the time. She was in a great deal of discomfort and pain within 2 hours. Within 2 hours, she was pain-free, and the last report was, after a period of time, I'm not sure of the period of time, but the child was symptom-free.
Symptom-free and no more recurrent urinary tract infections.
Can you imagine if they could have discovered this 5 years ago?
5 years sooner. You know, I've used charcoal for food poisoning. No one likes to run into the bathroom with diarrhea and that cramping that occurs.
Yes, you don't have to wait till a severe case of poisoning.
Right.
We may go out to eat at a restaurant, or some friends may invite us home, or we're traveling overseas for whatever reason, and we eat some strange food or drink some strange water, and we suddenly find ourselves with an upset, floppy stomach.
Right.
And it's not bad enough that we have to go to the emergency, but we don't really want to lay there all night either. Well, take a glass of water, stir the charcoal into the water.
Into the water, not the other way around.
Not the other way around, and drink that down. And usually, within a half an hour, that upset stomach, that indigestion or gas or heartburn or acid reflux is brought under control.
Well, you know, on PubMed in the American Journal of Gastroenterology, they did do a study. It was a double-blind clinical trial that looked at activated charcoal in decrease in intestinal gas. And so those things that we were doing through faith, there's actually some clinical research to substantiate that.
Well, there's lots of anecdotal stories out there, but I found, as I gathered some of the stories for the book, how many people who had really good stories were actually healthcare providers, whether doctors, physicians' assistants, nurses, chemists, lab techs, people who are really informed. Now, this is something unusual because back in 1908, the Sears and Roebuck catalog actually carried charcoal in their catalog.
In their catalog.
And they said, as everybody knows, charcoal is so good for indigestion, heartburn and gas, and so forth. But that was 1908, and somehow charcoal disappeared off the radar screen, and it's only now people are becoming more aware of it. We attended a trade show, and somebody picked up the literature when I wasn't there and contacted me after the show, and he was a head nurse in an emergency room.
Oh, really?
And he said, charcoal, it's absolutely amazing. And he says, I don't even wait to get sick. If I feel the symptoms of a flu coming on or a bug, upset stomach, I take the charcoal. He said, I don't know how it works, but it seems to eliminate those symptoms, and I'm free. I don't have to go through the whole flu cycle.
Well, that's a principle in simple home remedies, that you do start at the very first sign of symptoms. Don't wait until all the symptoms track in, because by that time
you will need to go to the emergency.
You will need to go to the emergency room. So whatever it is, whether it's a cold, whether it's an upset stomach, right away we want people doing the simple home remedies. Charcoal, drinking lots of water. We like to do that water flush where you drink, several glasses in just an hour's time, and that really flushes the virus likes dry membranes, and so if you flush those membranes, the virus is not able to attack and attach as easily.
Sure.
And then you couple that with activated charcoal with those van der Waals forces pulling and sucking in those toxins, then we've truly got a nice, simple remedy.
Well, you mentioned water, and charcoal as a simple home remedy only is as effective as we use a holistic health program. You mentioned water. Of course, we know about exercise and good nutrition and all these other preventives. So charcoal is not a magic bullet.
No,
it's not a cure-all. Sometimes it works. For many people, it does work. Sometimes it may not work, and you're going to have to look for some other safe remedy as an alternative. before you have to go to the hospital if need be.
Exactly.
Another thing that people sometimes say, oh, charcoal is burnt toast. Now, I'm not saying that burnt toast might not be a home remedy, but it's not charcoal.
It's not charcoal. In fact, burnt toast is actually carcinogenic.
Yes, it's superheated carbohydrates, proteins, and fats.
Right.
And these things, yeah, they can be carcinogenic.
They can be carcinogenic, meaning cancer-forming.
Correct. And since you brought up carcinogenic, let's talk a little bit briefly about briquettes.
Yes.
I know that there are actual natural charcoal briquettes, but most people, when they go into the store and buy briquettes, it's impregnated with fossil fuels to help them ignite. And that is not something you would want to take internally or apply superficially. Now, it's also been, some people have said, well, charcoal is carcinogenic. And the reason is the connection to benzopyrenes. Right. A lot of people barbecue their food, braise your food, and what happens is when they're cooking their food, these fats, juices drip down onto these hot coals, they vaporize, form these benzopyrenes, and then embed themselves against the bottom of the food that they're barbecuing. But that's not charcoal, it's the heat from the charcoal that produces these benzopyrenes. So there we have the list. Charcoal is not toast, it's not briquettes, and it's not a cure-all. Would want to mention to you, charcoal has an indefinite lifespan. When you buy it at the store, it'll come either as a powder, as a tablet, as a capsule, and sometimes it will be stamped with a shelf life. It's only for marketing purposes. Actually, if you keep the lid tight, it will last indefinitely.
I've had charcoal for years.
Yes.
Yeah, I've had 10 years.
Sure.
Yes,
it's still very, very active.
And it's very effective.
Right. In fact, the WHO, World Health Organization, has passed a resolution encouraging member nations to really study into using simple, natural, harmless, scientifically proven remedies. And I can think of no remedy that fits that description better than charcoal. In fact, when you think of diarrhea, now diarrhea, according to the WHO, kills around 5,000 people every single day of the year. Cholera is a major killer in some developing countries. We don't have it here. But charcoal deals with severe diarrhea. When I was working on a remote island out in the Pacific, the community nurse was dealing with a patient who had severe cholera. She was not able to help him with her standard medicines, and she gave charcoal, stopped the diarrhea. She then gave the rehydration salts, and she was able to save his life.
So from something as simple as a bee sting to something as serious as cholera, activated charcoal is simple and scientifically proven.
Yes.
John, I want to thank you for coming and sharing this wonderful information with us and with our viewing audience and those around the world. Thank you. And we wish above all things that you will prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. May God bless you.
The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Hello and welcome to Wonderfully Made. My name is Dr. Christine Salter and I'm board certified in family medicine and I'm in private practice in St. Louis, Missouri. Today we're going to be discussing about a simple home remedy called activated charcoal. And we have a guest with us, Mr. John Dinsley, who has written a book about charcoal. John, I'd like to welcome you to our program today.
Dr. Salter, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
So tell me, why did you write a book about charcoal?
A good question. Why would anybody want to write something about what's left over from your campfire?
Exactly.
Or from your wood stove? Well, charcoal, as you said, activated charcoal or medicinal charcoal, actually has been used for many, many years. Even 1500 years BC, the Egyptians were using it to control wounds, infections, odors. But in the end of the 20th century, there was a tremendous interest in simple, natural home remedies. And because of my experience with charcoal, my traveling in different countries, that's where it all goes back to.
Well, that sounds really interesting. So you've traveled Guatemala and in other places, Nepal.
Yes.
What
a real
experiences
privilege
did you
to
have?
work there. And in working with the doctors there, the different healthcare providers, especially learned the importance of a good health program. But when it came to treating disease, they instilled in me this notion that I needed to be the gatekeeper of my own health. The people that they treated oftentimes were living remotely from where the clinic was or the hospital, and they did not want to put a dependence upon these people on the doctor, on the healthcare facility, because these people were so remote. They needed to be able to treat themselves oftentimes because it took maybe half a day to get to the nearest road, a couple of days to get to the nearest hospital. Emergency care was obviously out of reach. They needed something that they could use where they were.
Where they were. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's true for here in North America too, and in the other more developed countries. We do want people to be gatekeepers of their health and to do what they can do in the home setting, even prior to seeing a physician.
Well, a lot of people are asking the question, you know, with drugs that are readily available, over-the-counter, prescription, why should I even think about using something like charcoal?
Charcoal.
But I would like to take a look at our graphic here and look at some of the reasons why we today might want to think about using a simple natural remedy. On our list we have iatrogenic death, nosocomial disease, plagues, cost, and calamities. Well, the first two, iatrogenic death and nosocomial disease, it's actually a subgroup of iatrogenic death. And these are deaths that originate in the hospital because of complications in either administering of drugs, surgery, and so forth. And these are large figures. According to the Journal of Medical Association in the year 2000, 225,000 people died because of iatrogenic death. So obviously, it's sort of like friendly fire.
Right.
You know, this is obviously not intentional, but there are consequences to using
properly prescribed medicines.
Yes. And so people are saying, is there something that I can use as an alternative that doesn't have the side effects associated? And if we use more heroic methods of treating disease right off the beginning, what are we left with in an emergency? People are developing, diseases are developing resistance to a lot of drugs. Some diseases are triggered by antibiotics, and so we know this. What can people do for themselves that is safe?
That's safe. That's absolutely true. Antibiotic resistance is very concerning, rise at an alarming rate. A lot of patients, they come to physicians, they may only have a viral infection, but they want an antibiotic because they want to feel well right away. And what happens is that we're under pressure to prescribe, and we really have to hold our ground. I have to hold my ground and say, well, let's allow your body, it's a virus, we don't have an antibiotic for a virus. We want the body to deal with this, run the fever and that whole thing. And then I like to have a simple remedy that I can have them do in the home that will make them feel better. Because basically they want to feel better, and they're thinking in their mind that if I prescribe an antibiotic, that's going to make them feel better. And more often than not, they take the antibiotic and, oh, I'm not any better. Well, it's not going to treat the virus.
We're cultured that way in society to think that way, but there are safer alternatives. And charcoal is a simple natural remedy that, as far as we know, has no serious side effects. Our body does not digest charcoal, and so it's not assimilated. It's whatever serious side effects that have been noted in the literature are usually associated in hospitals. And today we're talking about home application of charcoal as a simple home remedy.
So how does this work? Is there any science behind this?
Oh, there's lots of science. I'm sure you've read in different medical journals, the JMA, the Lancet, Clinical Toxicology, just to name a few. These journals have picked up on this amazing ability for charcoal, medicinal charcoal, activated charcoal, to absorb poisons, toxic waste products from cancerous wounds, not just accidental poisoning in hospitals, but, for instance, poisonous plants, mushroom poisoning,
Amanita poisoning,
Amanita, or insect bites, the brown recluse spider. Sometimes it can stop anaphylactic shock from people who have been stung by a bee or a hornet. I was reading an article recently by an allergist in Canada, one of the foremost allergists on peanut. And he was saying that clinically they've been shown that charcoal can absorb the peanut protein allergen in 30 seconds. So clinically there's a lot of research to show why it should work in the home. And so that's what we're talking today about, the home application. Now, a lot of healthcare professionals, including yourself, have used charcoal. You use it on a professional basis for accidental poisoning in emergency rooms. Poison control centers recommend it. It's used in kidney dialysis machine. I've talked with even nurses, and they don't realize that the kidney dialysis machine is actually a bed of granular charcoal, and the blood is filtered through that, and it's clean because your kidneys have stopped doing the work of cleansing the blood. Interestingly enough, Dr. Hillebrand, who's director of liver transplant at Loma Linda University Hospital in California, has developed a liver dialysis machine to do similar to what the kidney dialysis machine does. When the liver has stopped functioning or it's overloaded, it can't perform its job properly of removing...
Eliminating toxins.
Exactly. So if a machine can do that using charcoal, can we use it in the home? It seems to imply that yes, we can. And again, here in North America, we can often access good health care facilities. But many of your audience live in developing countries where I've worked, and they don't have that accessibility.
That access to healthcare, but also even here in North America and in some of the other developed countries, people in rural areas and in some of the urban areas don't have access to healthcare. Well,
whether you're in a city even parked next to a hospital, I bet you have a fire extinguisher. You know, we never anticipate or expect a fire in our home, but we carry a fire extinguisher for that emergency. And if the poison control centers are telling us we should have charcoal in our homes for accidental poisoning, as we mentioned, Amanita, the poison mushroom, doesn't it make good sense? Then we should have it in our emergency kits. But we talked a little bit earlier about some of the other reasons why we should have charcoal in the home, and I'd like to put up the graphic on calamities. Now, we've seen a few of those recently.
Yes, we have, very sadly.
the earthquake, the tsunami in Indonesia, and then closer to home we had the Hurricane Katrina. I was listening to on the news, and it was saying it was like shock and awe. As the hurricane came ashore, it took out communications, it took out transportation, it took out emergency facilities, it isolated communities, and then it cut off retreat. And we would like to think that would never happen in our neighborhood. But whether it's a flood, whether it's an earthquake, some of these calamities are coming closer. Wouldn't it make good sense to have not only a first aid kit? A lot of these people didn't even have a first aid kit, but they should have charcoal in that first aid kit along with them.
And we really want to encourage our viewers to make sure they do have a very good first aid kit in their home.
Sure.
That would include activated charcoal. Tell us what it means for the charcoal to be activated.
Okay, well, you take raw charcoal, you've put your campfire out, you're out camping, you put the fire out, you have charcoal left over. Now, charcoal can come from any number of plant sources. You can oftentimes take coconut shells or bamboo, olive pits, peat moss. They take this initial charcoal and then they subject it again to very high temperatures, 800 degrees Celsius, and then they bombard it with steam or air, and it erodes this internal structure of the charcoal molecule, giving it a tremendous surface area.
Surface area.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, you know, the standard dosing in pediatric poisoning is 50 grams, which is 5 tablespoons, and that's actually equivalent to 10 football fields. So we can see how when the charcoal is activated, just how much surface area there is to actually absorb all these toxins. And we say adsorb, adsorb, not absorb, because it sucks these toxins onto its surface and all these meters of surface area. So it makes it very useful.
And holds those poisons until it's eliminated from the body. Now, charcoal is known to absorb over 4,000 natural and man-made poisons and toxins. And that unique feature is used every day in the hospitals, but it has the other flip side to that.
Right.
Drugs, when we overdose on drugs, we want to use charcoal to bind those excess drugs because somebody's overdosed. Charcoal does not discriminate between poisons, and a lot of drugs are definitely poisonous. And so if somebody's taking a medication, they want to be aware that their charcoal, if they're taking charcoal, it's not going to discriminate between their medication and other poisons, toxins in their body. Exactly. So they'll want to give themselves, depending on who you're reading in the literature, they'll say anywhere from 1.5 hours before, 1.5 hours after you take your medication. Give yourself that window for your medication. Yeah,
or even up to 2 hours.
Could be, yes.
So you want to keep that charcoal away from the time that you're taking prescription medicines, because it will suck those medicines too.
Yes.
And make them ineffective.
If you're concerned, you should talk with your physician. Again, if you can't take it internally because you're worried about it compromising your medication, you may apply it externally. It can be done in baths, a warm foot bath. You can add charcoal to that as a detoxifier. For instance, gout. I was working on a remote island in the Pacific, and we came into this island one evening, and we were under this large shelter called a maniaba, and the minister came in. He came in stumbling, and he was grimacing with pain.
Oh,
and I looked at him and I thought, oh, what's wrong? And he says, oh, my big toe is killing me. I have not slept for weeks as the pain is so severe. And I'm not a physician, but I started thinking, I wonder if it maybe he's suffering from gout. And not knowing, we made a foot bath with charcoal. Now, it wasn't this wonderful activated charcoal that is accessible here. We're on a remote island. I found some crude charcoal. We pulverized it, put it in the water. I did have some charcoal capsules that I brought with me.
Okay.
I gave that for him to take internally. The next morning, I came down the path, and here's the pastor grinding up charcoal to make a hot foot bath. It had worked for him. So it had absorbed the uric acid that crystallizes out in your extremities in gout, had absorbed it through the skin, And so you can see that charcoal does work internally, but it also works externally.
So
poultices and baths.
And I think that Pastor was very happy with you. I think you'd be his best friend for clearing up his gout. Do you think he would want you to wait until there was a randomized, double-blind, controlled trial to prove that activated charcoal pulls uric acid through the skin?
Well, it's very interesting information. You know, you can read all this, but it's a lot more friendly to use it yourself. And I guess we're trying to acquaint our audience with this simple remedy. For many of them, it's what you might call off the wall. It's something brand new to them. But we're hoping that it begins with experimentation. We talked about being a gatekeeper. We are giving you the assurance that there are no side effects, major side effects to charcoal, no known side effects to charcoal. It's something simple you can use in your home. Again, it's used in hospitals as well.
Right. So we know that it is very useful, and sometimes when we know that something's useful, we can extrapolate and use it for other things, and we don't have to wait for those randomized double-blind controlled trials. We don't even wait for all those for half the drugs that we're using.
Well, we talked a little bit earlier about calamities, and maybe throw up the graphic now about aftershock. You know, when there is a calamity, war or earthquake, so forth, very quickly we find ourselves in a situation with poor sanitation, water contamination, power failure, transportation failure, spread of disease, and depending where you are, the availability of medical care. If you have something in your home, you can start right now as you wait for emergency care to come to you.
You've spoken about the concept of gatekeeper. It's important that for all of us that we do become gatekeepers of our own health, of our family's health, that we do have the appropriate supplies there. You know, with the recent Hurricane Katrina, it was very bad because the hospitals were flooded. You know, and people could not get to the appropriate medical care.
Well, when you think that water is filtered through charcoal all around the world, from Olympic aquariums to our drinking water, up in space, the space station uses charcoal to clean their air and their water, their nuclear submarines. So it filters water, it cleans water, dirty water. It's used in wound dressings. Johnson & Johnson has a wound dressing with charcoal in it. The soldiers in Iraq have charcoal in their clothing to absorb potential chemical warfare. But where do you get charcoal here at home?
I was going to ask you that.
Well, if they don't have it, go to the pharmacy. I say if they don't have it, ask them, and in most cases they'll be glad, they'll be happy to bring it in for you. Health food stores and co-ops often have it. You get it in capsules, tablets, powder, sometimes even as salve. It's also dispensed in the poison control centers in a suspended solution. They just shake it up and give it to you immediately. But you know, in a home, if you keep it in a dry, well-sealed container, it'll last indefinitely. When the occasion arises, you just add it to the water, stir it in, and drink it back.
I've had charcoal under my kitchen sink for years, and I use it for various things: sore throat, gastroenteritis, ear infection. So I've used it for a variety of things. It's not a substitute for medical care, but sometimes it can
tide you over
until you get that opportunity to go there. You see, so
the other area I should bring up, because we all like animals.
Right.
In the story, one of the stories in my book, I tell about this lady who operated a camel expedition around Australia. She had 5 or so camels, and this one day they stopped at this place, this oasis, and they put it in this compound, and there was a tree there that the lady didn't realize was deadly poisonous. And one of her camels, she called it Greedy Gut, went over and started munching on this tree, and then before long was laying down on all fours and couldn't get it up. And she, in the process of trying to think what she could do, she remembered charcoal. And she gave charcoal to it. But it seemed to help, but she tried other things as well. Eventually she came back and got some more charcoal, gave it again, and she was convinced that charcoal definitely helped. So much so that Farther down the trail, again, one of the other camels ate something it shouldn't have eaten. She again applied the charcoal, and she said charcoal was the remedy. But when I looked at the weights of her animals and the amount of charcoal she was giving, I'm convinced that if she'd given a lot more, those camels would have responded much quicker. There is a dosage. It's in the animal poison control centers, they recommend anywhere from 1 gram to 3 grams per kilogram of body weight animal. When doctors prescribe charcoal, they sometimes, to people, they usually come up with 3 recipes or dosages. One is the one you mentioned, anywhere up to 50 grams for a child. Another one says 10 grams of charcoal for every gram of poison that you've taken. But how many of you are going to sit down and say, well, I think 10 grams of charcoal? Give lots. You can give too little, but you can't give too much.
And as long as you're given lots of fluid with it.
Yes,
also,
you'll have no complications.
No problems with that.
So yes, the animals is another whole area where we could be giving charcoal. A lady who had read the book mentioned that she went home and decided she was going to do her own experimenting, but not on herself. She had an old dog, and she described, I didn't see the dog, she described this softball-sized growth in its abdomen. It made it very uncomfortable for the dog, and she thought, well, I'll try charcoal. Can't hurt anything. So she wrestled a capsule of charcoal, activated charcoal, down the dog's throat every day for 6 weeks. Okay. Now, I never saw the dog, but she said after 6 weeks, she says, I'm convinced it worked. For whatever reason, she says it's down to the size of a golf ball. And she decided rather than using capsules, she'd get some powder. It's a lot more economical. It's cheap. And she would use that. She'd just mix it in with the food. I said, well, actually, they've been doing that. They do that on a commercial basis. In some large animal factories, they'll add charcoal to the feed, prevent them from bacterial infections and so forth.
Yeah, there's been a study in the American Journal of Gastroenterology that talks about how activated charcoal absorbs intestinal gas. And that is very effective. And so that whole idea of absorption and that large surface area comes into play again.
With animals.
There's nothing, I don't think there's anything magical about charcoal. It's simple, it works.
And it's scientific.
It's scientific. It's really pulling through electrical forces. It pulls materials to itself and then hangs onto it.
One thought that came to my mind is when people do go down to purchase charcoal, on the bottle they will see activated. That's the first thing they want to see is it's activated. There is another grade up from that called USP or US Pharmacopoeia grade, and that simply means that charcoal has been acid washed to remove some of the ash content. It's a more pure form. In fact, the pharmaceutical companies use that grade of charcoal to clean their drugs, to take away objectionable odors or colors from their medications. On the bottle, you will may also see it listed as a food supplement. Well, charcoal is not a food supplement because we don't digest it, we don't absorb it. Well, they're sort of it's a conundrum. They don't know what to do with charcoal. It's not a mineral, it's not a supplement, but because they don't know what to call it, they call it a food supplement. It does not absorb minerals and natural minerals and vitamins. There is some anecdotal evidence that it does absorb some man-made artificial vitamins and minerals, but
so with food, it's not going to absorb the natural nutrients of
food. The food industry puts it in licorice. They put it in jelly beans. It's in caviar. It's in mascara. It's used in many different ways. People who lose their lower bowels, they have a colostomy. For years, they used to give charcoal to these individuals to be able to handle not only the indigestion, but also the gas that forms. Now, they make ostomy bags that actually have charcoal filters on them to be able to handle that. But previously, these individuals used it on a regular basis and showed no signs of nutritional compromise. So you can put that fear to sleep. Again, if you're drinking adequate water, you're having a good balanced diet, so forth, you have nothing to fear.
So we're not just talking about using on an emergency basis. It's not like, instead of going to the emergency room, I'm going to take this. It can be used for just something simple, sore throat.
Yeah, I know.
Pink eye.
Yes, some lifestyle programs that I've been involved in, they used it as a general detox. People who wanted to get off drugs, street drugs, they wanted to detoxify their body. I know of one individual who her doctor gave her charcoal in a Dixie cup every day to take, mixed with olive oil, because she developed Crohn's, very severe Crohn's. And with the Crohn's, there's a diarrhea forms.
That's right.
Along with some of these other diseases, irritable bowel disease.
Why don't you let me tell the viewing audience about Crohn's disease. Crohn's disease is an inflammatory bowel disease where there's a lot of inflammation and sometimes ulceration and a lot of diarrhea. It's very uncomfortable and disabling to patients, having to run to the bathroom, having to be close to a bathroom. And so to use something simple like activated charcoal makes a big difference to them. So that Crohn's disease.
Another thing that comes to mind is open ulcers. It can be caused for any number of things. When I was working on this remote Pacific island, I got strep infections on my leg. It wasn't the flesh-eating kind, but it literally ate out holes on my leg. And I used charcoal, and it didn't do very much for the pain, but it did take care of it. Once I realized what was happening, it stopped the growth of the infection, and it did start to promote healing. People who have geriatric cases where they end up with these ulcers that don't seem to respond to anything. Oftentimes a very mild foot bath with charcoal will help to retard the growth of the infection and promote healing.
And that's using not only activated charcoal but some simple hydrotherapy.
Exactly.
That's another simple home remedy used in combination together.
Right, well these are simple alternatives. They make us the gatekeeper, as you mentioned earlier, of our health. We certainly can take advantage of the wonderful advances in healthcare that we've seen over the past century. But what do you do when you're away from home, away from a facility where you've come to depend upon it all the time? Shouldn't you carry it with you? Wouldn't it make perfect sense that not only do you have it in your home, but if you're traveling overseas, I know many non-governmental organizations that are working overseas, on their checklist they say bring activated charcoal.
Yes, absolutely. Right. In fact, my patients who are traveling, that's the first thing I tell them, to make sure they've got in their travel kit, and they say, what's that? Okay, and a quick explanation, they say, I'll take it with me. And they were very happy to have that activated charcoal, and they did well.
I bet they did.
And so we don't have to wait for those randomized double-blind control trials. We have a nice, simple home remedy, activated charcoal. John, you've given us a lot of good information today, and we just thank you for coming and sharing this information with our viewers. And to our viewers, we want to say to you, if you want to know more information, please contact 3ABN so they direct you to the correct resources. And may God bless you as you use these simple home remedies.